Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider for Clutch Points. And today on the show, we will be talking about old Robbie P. Old keep his job, Rob. We have a lot to get to in this one as we will look back on the season that took place, the expectations going into it, and then kind of our expectations and hopes for him moving forward. There's a lot going on here. It was the most Rob Pelinka season that has ever existed. I'll explain why. When I say perfect Robbie P season, emphasize the Robbie P part of this, not the perfect part of this, because it wasn't a perfect season for old Robbie Deals. So we're going to get to all of this right now. A quick reminder, please do hit subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast, preferably on Odyssey, because I am a company man. If you guys are watching live right now on YouTube, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button as well. And then if you guys are listening or watching on Twitter, where you can follow me at Anthony Irwin LA, please head on over to youtube.com/@ Lakers Lounge. Hell, if you listen to this show in the mornings and want to check out the show that, you know, in its live or video form, which is really fun. Like I was listening back to a couple of our episodes here, especially the ones with guests. And a lot of times, you know, you have guests who aren't necessarily comfortable laughing audibly in a show, or there's nonverbal communication that takes place that you know, you might miss, and you know, whether it's smiling or acknowledgement or disagreement, even just like there's context to the show that you might be missing out on. So if you guys are listening to it in its audio form, thank you very much for listening to it that way. But also check out the video form where you can catch more of that stuff. And again, to those of you, if you're listening to this in the morning, you can find the show on YouTube at youtube.com/@ Lakers Lounge. All right, enough of that stuff. It sucks that we have to do it, but we have to do it. All right, so let's start with expectations going into the season. I was working on notes on everything that Rob Pelinka did coming into the season last summer, and turns out I didn't have to write very much. It's just, you know, it's a blank piece of paper that you hold up there because he didn't do anything. He sat out the transaction window. Now the Lakers did draft Dalton Connect, which you could maybe argue at this point, with hindsight being a tool, but you could maybe argue that draft night wasn't as successful as the Lakers thought it was in the moment, as you know, they headed into it. If the Lakers basically considered the NBA draft last year and their first round pick at their disposal the only opportunity for them to go out and get a better center, as they wanted to do on draft night. And then, you know, if you're looking through the draft last year as, you know, through that prism of you had this very clear box that you needed to check, then draft night was a failure, because after drafting Dalton Connect, the Lakers didn't do anything else to go back and check that box. So, you know, I was hoping after they drafted Connect that maybe they would buy into the second round. I really liked Adem Bona from UCLA, high motor big, and with some physical skills, right? Some athleticism skills. Folks in Philly seem to like him quite a bit last year too, which you know, stung a little bit. But I was thinking, all right, well, you got Connect, you do address some shooting, and I was excited to get this guy where the Lakers got him. And then I was hoping that you would go back and address that very clear hole. Remember, we weren't sure if and when Christian Wood was going to be able to play. We knew that even if Jaxson Hayes played, we weren't going to be over the moon with what we saw, what we would eventually see from him. Anthony Davis obviously was a great center option, but he and some of us who had watched him play were kind of wondering if it might make more sense to go with a more feasible two big lineup with him. And the Lakers just basically sat it out after they drafted Dalton Connect. They also obviously drafted Bronny, which was a thing that they had to do. And again, it's like, all right, so going into the draft that you need a center. And if you're going into the offseason and the only way that you're going to improve your team is through the draft, then or on draft night, then you really, really needed to. And by the way, that you're gonna draft Bronny number 55. So number 17 or whatever it was your only opportunity to go out and draft the center that you wanted. And, it was between Tristan da Silva and Misi, who was the other guy there. And they just didn't. They took Dalton and then watched all of the second round basically go by and weren't able to either trade for or buy or whatever a second rounder that would have given them that opportunity to draft a center, and then watch the whole rest of the summer go by and didn't do anything outside of that. They didn't open up a roster spot. Jovan puts this point really well, where it was like there were options to improve your roster. Gary Trent Jr., he had interest in going to the Lakers, and eventually signed for the minimum. Would have signed for the minimum with the Lakers. The Lakers didn't use their mini mid-level exception that they could have used, and they didn't use any of it last year. And that would have given them the advantage on somebody like Gary Trent Jr. to offer up, an extra $500K or something like that the other teams couldn't. But because they didn't open up that roster spot, Trent goes to Milwaukee, had a pretty good year with them, and is now on the market again, and the Lakers might be able to get him. But we'll see. They have other issues that they have to sort out and use, whether it's unless he's willing to sign for a veteran minimum again. I think he had a good enough season to prove that he isn't a vet min player, but I wouldn't have thought he was a vet min player last year either. So maybe the Lakers luck out and they're able to get him. But you knew that, Maxwell Lewis wasn't a very good basketball player. Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, those guys, you were just sitting there at the end of the roster for all season. They never did what was necessary to they eventually waived Reddish anyway. And had they waived Reddish a little bit earlier, they would have been able to, or attached a conditional second rounder to Reddish and trade him into some team's cap space, so that you open up the money and the roster spot. They didn't do any of that. They just sat it out. And, we come to find out, I've reported on this. Jeannie Buss has kind of sort of admitted to this, but the Lakers were essentially just kind of riding out the rest of the LeBron and AD era. And in doing so, essentially damned the beginning of the Luka Doncic era. So, in terms of expectations going into the season, my expectation was like, holy bleep, dude, do something. The expectations there on Rob were pretty simple. It was like anything whatsoever. My response after the offseason that the Lakers had was essentially,
what the fuck?
What? You didn't do anything? You couldn't find somebody to take a flyer on Maxwell Lewis? He's a really young athletic wing. Like you could have, nobody was interested in him for the second round for a second rounder or a conditional second, like top 59 protected. And no, the Lakers didn't do that. And you know, I thought that they needed to move D'Angelo Russell last summer. They decided not to do that, and you know, cited the fact that the league was indicating to them that in order to move Russell back during last summer, they needed to attach draft capital to him, that he was a negative asset at the time. And at the beginning of the season, you had that really awkward Austin D'Angelo Russell backcourt, which didn't work. Eventually, D'Lo gets benched, and eventually he gets moved for Dorian Finney-Smith. And Finney and DFS showed up, and he was a good player for the Lakers for the rest of the regular season. Had a really disappointing postseason, did Dodo, but at the end of the day, in terms of coming into the season, I would say Rob. It's funny. And this is why it's a perfect Rob Pelinka season. He simultaneously thoroughly disappointed me coming into the season. And then, you know, to quote the great philosopher, I think it's Harry and Lloyd philosophers, Harry and Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber.
You know, Lloyd, just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
So let's talk about the math that we basically have to do on Rob Pelinka here. On one hand, I would argue he wasted the back end of LeBron and AD continuing to be really, really good at basketball. You know, they were both all NBA caliber their previous season. The Lakers didn't have anything to show for that. They were they I think were gentlemen swept out of the first round of the playoffs by the Denver Nuggets. And you know, LeBron just kept on holding off Father Time in ways that we have just never seen before. And the Lakers essentially looked at both LeBron and Anthony Davis and were like, yeah, we're happy we got that one championship. But outside of that, you know, let's just be really nice to each other over the final few seasons while you guys are here. And then we'll all kind of reset after the fact. And I just thought it was a giant wasted opportunity. How many teams would give their right arms to be able to have? I mean, we found out the Dallas Mavericks eventually gave their right arm to have Anthony Davis in Luka Doncic. So it's like, how many teams would give up anything to have LeBron and Anthony Davis on your team? And the Lakers were like, oh man, woe is me. They want me to make improvements to the team. How dare they? You know, and so you come into the season and you're thoroughly disappointed by the fact that, you know, it appears to be the case. Rob is basically writing out this you know, final chapter or so of LeBron and AD. They make the Luka Doncic trade. And Jeannie again essentially admitted that like they didn't feel they had the assets necessary to compete fully with LeBron and AD, and do everything that needed to be done to the roster to make them more competitive. And I don't know, man. I never thought that they were as far away as the Lakers believed and wanted us to believe they were with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And we started to see it right before the Luka Doncic trade. They finally made a tweak to the roster in swapping out D'Angelo Russell for Dorian Finney-Smith. The Lakers immediately looked really bleeping good. They finally looked a lot closer to the stronger, bigger, stronger, faster equation that won them a championship. And they looked overwhelming at times. And then, you know, obviously AD gets hurt and eventually the Lakers make the Luka Doncic trade. But I do think the reason I'm focusing so much on the fact that Rob and Jeannie and the Rambi and Tim Harris and everybody responsible for decisions made within the Lakers organization, the reason I'm spending so much time harping on this wasted opportunity that the Lakers had is because all of those people are now responsible for the Luka tenure. And while they all have carte blanche to fuck up the Lakers however they want, because Jeannie won't fire any of them, uh, it it should make you a little nervous that the same people who underwhelmed with LeBron and AD are now responsible for Luka and this era that we're entering in with him. It would make me really nervous if I were Luka. That's for damn sure. So, whiffing the way that they did, transaction window after transaction window, um, it just it stings the nostrils. And then they make the Luka trade, and it's like all of the stuff that I just talked about. It's not that it doesn't matter. Again, it matters in that process and previous success at various tasks should indicate or potentially predict what what the future might entail. But the Luka trade wipes a lot of that slate clean. It does, make me look like an idiot because I'm sitting here saying this guy sucks, this guy sucks, this guy sucks, and then eventually I have to make the case for Rob as executive of the year because he did something that every other executive would just basically beg Christ himself to be able to do, which is go out and get a discount on the face of your franchise. And now look, I do think the whole trade not being great is a little overblown. Giving up Anthony Davis, still in his prime, giving up Max Christie, who is basically exactly the player the Lakers need right now, and almost every team is going to need eventually. Giving up a pick and all that stuff, like that's not nothing. People are treating it as if it's nothing. It's not dollar for dollar, that's for sure. But I also like when people say, "Oh, this is the worst trade in the history of mankind." I actually think Anthony Davis is a little underrated at this point. But yeah, after criticizing this organization and front office and basketball ops leadership and I think rightfully criticizing them the way that I did, basically, they go out and have an incredible deadline. And you have Luka now as the centerpiece of your organization. You have an opportunity, I believe, with him and LeBron still, depending on how well the Lakers can juggle these chainsaws. And then after LeBron retires, yeah, it's going to kind of stink to lose LeBron, who will still be a really good player by the time he retires. It's going to kind of stink to lose LeBron for essentially nothing at that time. But you'll have pretty clean books, and you'll have any number of really good basketball players looking at the opportunity to play in LA, to play with Luka, and raise their platforms that way. They do have a great opportunity in front of them, one that they might squander, because I wouldn't say they squandered the LeBron and AD era. They did, I think, the back half of it, but I would probably say that it was kind of a meh experience when it should have been a lot more fun, I feel like. But yeah, I would caution those of you who have these high hopes for this really thin front office to understand how to hit on the margins, how to what is necessary around Luka. Like what does Rob stand for? We'll talk about this here in a second. But when you look back at this last season, the reason I say that it's the most Rob Pelinka season ever is because I think he just thoroughly failed fell on his face when it comes to actually building a balanced roster, even with or without Luka. Anytime you enter a postseason with only Jaxson Hayes as your center, and eventually your head coach feels the need to only play 5 players in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, that's on you. You did your job poorly. And then, for him to do his job so poorly and yet also have a season where I have to point out, hey, this guy did go out and get Luka in a trade you all are really angry about, meaning his fellow executives who vote on executive of the year. That would indicate he did his job at least okay in that one specific regard, right? And then it all played out in a very, I think, perfect way, in that the crimes of his past, sitting out 2 consecutive trade windows or transaction windows, saddling LeBron James and Anthony Davis with imbalanced roster after imbalanced roster after imbalanced roster. Eventually you do have that golden egg land in your lap, but you can't really do as much with it as you were hoping to, because you didn't do the work to hit the singles necessary. It's like, somebody, Angels Win here writes, or no, this is Jamal J writes, I just don't trust Rob to hit the singles at all. Fuck, dude, I'd take a walk. I would have taken a walk, a wild pitch, an error, like whatever it took, so that when you hit that home run into the upper deck in trading for Luka, you actually you can score a couple extra runs, and that homer is all the more meaningful. And they just didn't do that. They didn't align themselves well enough at a position that is, specifically really important for Luka. Like, here's the thing. As soon as you find out, as soon as Nico tells you, hey, I'm kind of sort of interested in potentially moving Luka, you start looking around and saying, like, oh shit, what do we need to do to build the best team that we can around Luka? It shouldn't take Luka showing up in your office and saying, yeah, I kind of want to roll a lob threat big. You should know that Luka just got to the finals the previous year with Daniel Gafford, with Derek Lively, with athleticism on the wing and shooting, and a secondary ball handler who could also attack and turn the corner. Like, take a look at that roster, man. Figure out, like, when you're looking, when Nico comes to you and says, hey, yeah, I've kind of lost my mind, I'm thinking about, maybe trading Luka. You should, say, like, okay, yeah, let's get this done ASAP, and keep whatever powder dry that you feel like you need to, but also simultaneously be looking around the league and having some conversations to say, like, and by the way, the opportunity was there. AD is telling anybody who will listen, yeah, I really want a another center. If you're Rob Pelinka and you feel like you might have a chance at getting Luka, and you should know that he needs a lob threat big to run even a decent offense for himself, you should be like, oh yeah, like AD's kind of, and you, even if you want to keep this Luka thing a secret, which apparently was at the utmost priority, even while we have now found out that a lot more people knew about this than we were led to believe initially. But you should have been doing your homework. Study up on what made the Mavericks successful. Talk to your pro scouting team on what, oh shit, that's right, you can't because you don't have one. But talk to your people about what they think made the Dallas Mavericks click the way that they did. And then, that way, when you trade for Luka, you aren't stuck with just Jaxson Hayes and Christian Coloco and Alex Len's corpse. Like, you gotta be a little bit more nimble on your feet, so that it doesn't take bringing Luka in, him saying he wants a center, you trading for a guy who has paper mache for knees, finding out, oh shit, that's right, he has paper mache for knees. having to rescind that trade and now going into the offseason with Jaxson Hayes. Those are the singles that you needed to hit, the walks that you needed to take, so that if and when you do get Luka or whoever your next superstar was going to be, you should be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of that team that made that player the kind of special that he was before he now arrives on your team. And he didn't do that. Rob didn't do that homework. It took apparently Luka showing up and asking for a rim protecting, rim running, and lob threat big. And now here we are months later, and Rob still hasn't checked off a box that, again, he needed to check off going into the bleeping NBA draft. So expectations moving forward. I don't know. I don't know. I like as much as I would like to be able to sit here and tell you, I'm super duper confident that this guy has figured out how to build out a roster. No, based on what? How could I possibly tell you guys that Rob is going to be able to do that? He didn't do that well. Like, let's go through the LeBron James experience with Rob Pelinka, whether he's in his current role or when Magic was still there. Their first idea when LeBron got there was to surround LeBron not with shooting and athleticism, but with a whole bunch of ball handling. And that experiment, that when LeBron was asked about it after the season, he literally farted into a mic. That was a headline. Dave McMenamin asked LeBron James, hey, what did you think of Magic and Rob's grand experiment? LeBron's actual response was, technical term. And so you go into, the next iteration of that after that season where LeBron was surrounded with just a ridiculous roster. Then the Anthony Davis stuff starts hitting. And now I can't quite blame Rob for this. Magic just completely mishandled those negotiations with Del Dems. At one point, I'm told Rob needed to ask a reporter who was covering the Lakers at the time. I won't say the reporter's name because I don't think they want that out there. Otherwise, they would have reported it. But at one point, Magic went to the reporter. The reporter gave Magic Del Demp's number, and that was the way that communication began between Magic and Demps. And remember, the first offer that Magic put on the table, and I think he even said this publicly, was something like Rondo and Nunn and whatever contracts also needed to go out, and like a conditional first round pick or something like that. And Demps and the Pelicans were like, no, what? And it essentially soured the Pelicans on having any kind of fruitful negotiations between them and Magic Johnson, and Demps and Magic Johnson. And the Lakers basically had to wait until Magic stepped away from the gig to focus on tweeting. And they needed to wait for Del Demps to also get fired. David Griffin shows up. Rob Pelinka shows up. Those two guys hold much more professional negotiations, and eventually a trade is figured out. And then remember, that was also the year when the Lakers thought they were going to get Kawhi Leonard too. I still talk to people, in the organization or close to the organization, who say he was a Laker. And something took place between Uncle Dennis and the Clippers, and eventually Kawhi signed that dotted line. Now, it also took the Paul George trade, which created this current juggernaut that is the Oklahoma City Thunder. But at the end of the day, the Lakers thought that they were getting Kawhi Leonard, and they didn't, obviously. And actually, that entire experience, made me think that Rob was actually going to be pretty good at this, because if you recall, they were going to get they thought they were going to get Kawhi Leonard, but had done their homework and had, talked to Danny Green and talked to some of these other guys and said, hey, if this plays out this way, then best of luck, in Toronto or whatever it was. But if we don't get Kawhi Leonard, and you wait, we will pay you a little bit more than fair market value for waiting, essentially. And they were able to get Danny Green that way. And Danny Green wound up playing a critical role in that championship team. They put together a championship team basically on the fly after Kawhi turned them down. And I thought, like, at the time, I was thinking, like, oh, shit, look at Rob. All right. Because I was also a little disappointed after Magic stepped away, given some of the names that I was told at the time were interested in the gig. I was like, man, are you sure you should really, like, are you sure Rob is the guy? There was some Masai Ujiri talk. There was some Bob Myers talk. There was some Sam Presti talk. There was some RC Buford talk. Like some of the names that were, even kind of interested in running the Lakers with LeBron James and with Anthony Davis. There was or Anthony Davis, probably coming soon. There were plenty of really bleeping good executives who had interest in the gig. And when the Lakers basically said, nope, Rob, you got this, I was really nervous. And then Rob has that summer, puts that team together. The Lakers eventually win a championship. And I was like, all right, I got to give credit here. Way to go, Rob. And I thought, hell yeah, this guy's got it figured out. This guy might be really good. Then, you go into the next season, and after winning the championship, and everybody was exhausted. And if I remember correctly, that was after winning the championship. They traded Danny Green, and the pick that eventually became Jaden McDaniels. Remember, the Lakers literally had to pick McDaniels and then send him out. Eventually, it became McDaniels, and McDaniels wound up in Minnesota, I think, via a different trade. But that Danny Green trade where you gave up Green, and I think he was on an expiring contract at the time, and a first round pick for Dennis Schroeder, who you didn't do your homework with. And he shows up, and immediately after Alex Caruso had just started in a finals clinching game that you were up by 40 in, Schroeder shows up and he's like, yeah, no, I'm not coming off the bench anymore. I'm starting. Yeah, I know you just won a championship and you have your culture in place, but yeah, fuck all that. I'm starting. And that should have been the red flag, honestly, because I didn't think, now Schroeder, people really seem to like Schroeder and all that stuff. He had a much better second stint, I thought, than his first. And it was this continued pursuit because it was what Rob thought would help him keep his job longest. It was this continued pursuit of ball handling around LeBron that I just never really understood, especially given the season that Caruso had in a smaller role. I was just like, oh, just expand his role. I think he'll be pretty good. Then they completely overreact to getting eliminated by the Phoenix Suns and a frustrating season that had a lot to do with injuries because everybody was still pretty beat from not just winning a championship in the longest season in the history of professional sports, but following that up with the shortest offseason ever. And then another quick offseason into the following season. And finally, the Lakers get eliminated by the Phoenix Suns. And I thought they completely overreacted to that series. They make the Russell Westbrook trade. They choose Talen Horton-Tucker over Alex Caruso when they didn't have to choose either of them. They could have just kept both. That will probably go down as the offseason that ended the LeBron and AD era. They basically had to do a whole bunch of damage control. Rob spent, I think, a lot more energy on trying to, distance himself from that Russell Westbrook trade than on actually making up for the trade. And we just never saw LeBron and AD and the Lakers click at the same level that they did when they won a championship or, the previous couple of years after that. And real bummer. I'm giving up all of this kind of history lesson because the same people who made those moves and didn't seem to understand what made that 2019-2020 season and team so special, they didn't understand it. They never seemed to understand what the rest of the league did, because they started building their teams you know, in that image. Everybody started saying, oh shit, we need to get bigger. Oof, we need to get more versatile on the perimeter. We need to do this and that. And the Lakers were like, we need more buckets. And you got a Kendrick Nunn, and you got a Montrezl Harrell, and it was just, you had that one really weird team that was like Carmelo and Wayne Ellington, and Trevor Ariza was going to save the season when he showed up. Russell Westbrook was still there. It was just this comedic run of fuck ups, and none of the people responsible for any of those fuck ups were ever shown the door. They were all promoted. And now Rob got another promotion. Again, I get why he got the promotion, because he traded for Luka bleeping Doncic. He deserves credit for that. But it's still like, man, I really wish you would have shown more to me before you traded for Luka, as we head into the latest, most critical offseason in Lakers history. So we'll see how this offseason goes. My expectation, my bar for what I'm expecting of the Lakers this summer and moving forward, you got to get a center. You got to get more athletic. You need to, even zooming out even further, I need to learn what you, Robert Todd Pelinka Jr., I think that's his full name, believe in from a basketball standpoint. How do you see the sport? How do you, are you a defense first guy? Are you an offense first guy? Do you believe in the 5-out system that JJ wants to run? Do you believe more in the 4-out 1-in system that Luka tends to like to run? Like, what do you to quote the Tupac song, who do you believe in? Like, it's just like, what do you actually believe in, other than I'm going to do whatever I need to do to remain employed? I'm going to please whoever I need to please, whether it's LeBron before. It never was Anthony Davis because LeBron was there, whether it's Genie this whole time, and now it's Luka. Rob's core tenet in this position is, I am going to do whatever I need to do to remain employed. And to be clear, that's how a good chunk of executives operate throughout professional sports. The best ones, though, you know what they believe in. There's an image there. Pat Riley in Miami, Sam Presti in OKC, the RC Buford and Greg Popovich combination in San Antonio for all these years. You kind of what they look for in players as they build out their rosters. Rob, he doesn't stand for anything. That's why it's been imbalanced roster going to the next imbalanced roster that addresses the flaws from the previous roster, but then leaves a gaping hole in the next season that they then have to over adjust for the following year. And it's just, this calamity of errors that leads to a pretty mediocre product. Especially it's maybe it's an outright bad product in comparison to your expectations going into, given the fact that he's already had LeBron and he's had Anthony Davis and now he has Luka. Your expectations should be up here. And my expectation going into this season is like, just please step over the bar that's lying on the ground. Now, all right, that's fair. Omar S. Hall says, stop it, Anthony. what Rob likes basketball wise. He likes those guards. He likes his combo guard. He does. He definitely does. And maybe that's like the only thing that Rob actually like. Maybe what's actually going on there, Omar, is like I'm sitting here saying like, what do you believe in? And it's actually what I'm asking for is like, please believe in what works. Please show that you understand what made the 2019-2020 team so special. Please, like, tell me that you watch other teams play this sport and recognize what makes OKC tick, what makes Indiana tick, what makes these other how these other teams started building in your image, that roster that you put together. All of these other teams started mimicking it to great success. And Rob was just sitting here like, yeah, but I need my point guard to be able to cross Hezi Jimbo. Like, no, like, give me a guy who can fucking defend. When was the last time the Lakers had an impact point of attack defender? And you can't say Dennis Schroeder because he's 5'9". So, yeah, the Lakers, in terms of expectations here moving forward, you have a ton of expiring contracts, movable expiring contracts. You have a first-round pick at your disposal that should be able to get you a pretty damn good player. You have one of the best trade assets in the league in Austin Reeves, and easily probably the best contract in the league in Austin Reeves next season. You have Rui Hachimura on an expiring contract coming off of another really strong season for you. You have Dalton Connect. You have the number 55 pick in this upcoming draft as well. You have pick swaps. They don't have, the most impressive trade cash or whatever, but they do have enough so that you can go into next season with a serious roster, with a respectable roster, where you go into the season and you're like, you know what? All right. That makes sense. And honestly, that's my expectation, is to go into next season and be able to look at that group and say, all right, got it. I see what you're going for here. That's the bare minimum, man. That's it. Now, in terms of what's at stake, right? This final bullet here, pressure's back on, because essentially what I've been able to gather is that Rob was able to convince Jeannie Buss and a whole bunch of people. There are still people in my mentions. You could probably scroll through the comments in this very video. There are plenty of people out there who say that LeBron James was solely responsible for the Russell Westbrook trade. And that's just not the case. What actually happened, and this has been reported on, I have reported on it, but what actually happened is Rob had a couple of avenues that they could go down. There was a Buddy Hield trade, and there was a Russell Westbrook trade. And Rob went to LeBron, went to Anthony Davis, and said, here are our two options. Here's door number 1, here's door number 2. And when LeBron and Anthony Davis said they lean more towards door number 1, right? The door that they eventually opened. I'm told, and have been told repeatedly and definitively, that Rob didn't exactly say, yeah, but door number 2 is really good. No, he was like, fuck yeah, let's kick this door down. And they trade for Russell Westbrook. But then after the trade, and especially after the trade wasn't going well, Rob started doing his work behind the scenes of like, yeah, those guys over there in Clutch, they really, yeah, really tough. I really like Buddy Hield, but it just, and he did enough convincing there and enough flat out outright lying to get Jeannie basically to say, all right, well, that's enough of those guys. Let's just get through the end of their tenure here and then recalibrate after they're gone. And Rob was basically able to live a super cush life from then. He hired Frank Vogel and then fired him after winning a championship and after giving him a lame duck extension after it was found out that that Vogel was going into the following season as a lame duck candidate. They brought in Darvin Ham, who they fired after an appearance in the Western Conference Finals. They were just completely rudderless, and Rob was basically able to run the organization with no rudder and with no engine, because it was just like, yeah, let's just get through this, and then by the time LeBron is gone, we can all just kind of move forward into the next chapter. And all of those guys, that cabal at the top of the organization, they were all on the same page in that regard. So Rob was basically able to kind of kick his feet up, get through that remainder of that tenure, and then this Luka trade happens, and it is an immediate scramble to prove to Luka that the Lakers are a serious enough organization that he should re-sign with them long term. That's where they find themselves now, where if the Lakers don't go into next season with a serious roster, right? A roster that makes sense, a roster that, Luka can look at and be like, okay, I can kind of see the bones, the foundation being laid here, that I can maximize my window here in LA. If the Lakers don't do enough work in that regard, Luka can just say, nope, I'm not going to sign my extension. And you're going to have to hear about Luka Doncic trade rumors for the entirety of the next season, because I might just leave via free agency the following year. Austin Reeves doing the same thing, where it's like, yeah, if you don't, I'm not going to, sign this extension. Austin's team has been crystal clear on that front, I'm told. So Austin is not going to sign his extension, and they are basically approaching the Lakers and saying, yeah, you better be ready to back up that Brinks truck for us, because if you don't, you might go from super duper valuable trade asset to nothing the following year. And the Lakers are a little nervous about that too. So, you can, right now, there are expectations being placed on Rob. Maybe not internally, because I think Jeannie had that exhale moment, like, oh, thank God he got Luka. I don't have to fire this guy. And so I think you do have that going on to a pretty great extent. But if Rob doesn't execute on this offseason, and he doesn't put in the work, and I know that Rob puts in the work. I have never heard from anybody that he's like lazy in any real way. I do think he's just a brilliant political mover and shaker internally. And he's much better at that than actually running a team. So, what happens if he doesn't do well this summer? If he doesn't check the boxes that we know he needs to check, then we're sitting here going into the next season with Luka potentially not signing that extension. If Luka signs this extension, then all right. But the good news is for us, quite frankly, Luka doesn't have to sign that extension until most, if not all, of the work is done. He gets to sit back and watch the Lakers figure out what they need to do to build around Luka. He gets to watch that up front and then make his decision after the summer transaction window on whether or not he saw enough from the Lakers to sign that dotted line. And there's a good chance he does, almost regardless of what the Lakers do. That's a possibility too. But if I'm the Lakers, I don't leave it to chance. And it's everything I have heard is that the Lakers, even while I have kind of wondered aloud if maybe a stopgap year makes the most sense, to keep your powder dry and then fully go after your next, 2A or 1A or whatever it is, after LeBron is gone. I don't think that's how this is going to play out. Everybody I've spoken to says the Lakers have been super aggressive. They are going to be super aggressive. And we'll see what that finally looks like when the Lakers put together whatever roster we get to watch next year. All right. Let's go ahead and run really quickly through some of your guys' questions. And okay, here's Rain Tomorrow L asking Anthony, is there any truth to this rumor that the Lakers tried to offer Rui for Jarrett Allen? Saw it on Twitter and tried to get to the actual source of that info and couldn't find it. I hadn't heard that personally, but we can just type in Rui Hachimura, Jarrett Allen trade rumors. May 26th, 2025. That's a hypothetical trade. There's another hypothetical trade. There's another one. Yeah, so it's all trade ideas. I haven't seen any specific rumor that linked Allen to the Lakers outside of people saying, "Hey, that's a center. The Lakers need one, right?" It wouldn't surprise me if Cleveland, like, I know we just found out that Darius Garland needed surgery on his foot and on his big toe after the season, and he clearly wasn't moving very well last year. So if you're Cleveland and you had that great season, do you basically kind of sort of run it back with hopefully a healthier Garland next time around, and then go out and see if you do better with hopefully a healthier team. A couple tweaks here and there as well, but I guess I don't know. I the Allen and Mobley tandem was so good for them last year. And unless you're willing to move Garland and bring in more perimeter athleticism and more defense on the perimeter, because the reason that they needed Allen and Mobley on the interior last year is because you had Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland as your backcourt, and there are some limitations there. And if you're big enough everywhere else, and they were plenty big, whether it was at the 3 spot and then eventually at the 4 and 5 spots, you can kind of make up for those concerns with a 2, 6, 3 and under guards at your 1 and 2 spot. So unless they're willing to move Garland and bring in, a better defender there so that you don't need that interior presence in Mobley and Allen, then I don't see I don't see why they would break all of that up. It was Kenny Atkinson's first year there too. I tend to think that they'll probably stick this out. But again, everybody is preparing for the most ridiculous summer ever. So maybe they're one of those teams too, and they break it up. And if they do break it up, then yeah, the Lakers definitely should get in on Allen talks, especially in some kind of multi-team deal where they can help push along a trade that makes multiple teams happy and maybe cost them a little bit less. Let's see. I'm going to look. Okay, AJ Baines writing, do you think Rob should trade into the first round this year? That's a tough one. That's a great question. Honestly, I don't think so personally. Again, look at this through the prism of proving to Luka Doncic that you should be the team for the duration of his career from here on out. And if you basically get eliminated pretty embarrassingly in the first round the previous year, and then you go into next season and you move win now talent to go out and get win in the future talent, that's a hard sell for Luka. So, like, if you're asking me, do I think that's what the Lakers should do? I think there's a case for it. if this was happening in a vacuum and Luka's happiness with the roster didn't matter. If you had Luka signed for the foreseeable future already, yeah, I do think that it would make sense to sell off a couple of guys, get a few more assets so that you can more feasibly trade for a Giannis if he becomes available, or yeah, players of that ilk. Because right now the Lakers can't get into those conversations. They just don't have enough stuff unless those guys force their way to LA. So I would probably say that I could see why your brain goes there. I could see why that is a thing that people are talking about. I'm also the guy, right, who has talked about that stopgap gap year. But you know, you think about it, it makes sense for a little while, but then you realize, oh shit, that's right, Luka hasn't signed yet. And that's priority one. That's priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and forever. Like, you need that figured out. Let's go with all right. I think I answered that one already. The poster king, would you do a Mark Williams type trade with Portland for Ayton and Kamara? Then you could maybe keep Austin for and Rui for bench scoring. I don't think you're getting Kamara without moving at least Rui and Dalton probably, and the first round pick. Like, I find it hard to believe that Kamara will be available this upcoming off season. They loved him there. He was one of the best defenders in the sport last year, on a team that really kind of desperately needs those kinds of defenders. So I don't know that Kamara is available. I still kind of think I like the idea of trading Rui and stuff for Ayton and a pick, and kind of buying low on him. And I know that it's probably not the sexiest move there, because Ayton was so disappointing for basically all of his career to this point. But if you can convince him, if you say, hey, here's how you stick it out in the league long term, here's how you continue to get paid the amount that you want to get paid. Here's, like, do the small things, set hard screens, rebound, protect the rim, rim run, all that good stuff. If you could get him to do those things and you only trade Rui and expirings for Ayton and even a second rounder, then I would say that's a big win. And if it doesn't work out, then if you don't move the first rounder, you could then move Ayton and that first rounder at the deadline, to go out and get the specific need that you actually need at that moment. But yeah, that to me is what I would probably do right now, just because as it stands right now, prices on Claxton, Allen, Adebayo, and everybody else basically are through the roof. And until those prices drop pretty significantly, I'm not really all that interested in trading a first rounder for any of the guys that I mentioned. They're honestly, well, I would trade a first rounder for Adebayo. I don't think he's available for what the Lakers can give up. But there isn't a center outside of Adebayo who even might be available that I would trade a first rounder for right now. Everybody has too many questions about it. And seeing as it's your only first rounder that you can move this season, my bar for moving that first rounder is pretty high. All right. I am going to, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that is, I'll just answer this really quick. Customized plate. Can we even afford Ayton's contract and to pay Reeves next year while also paying LeBron and Luka? It'll be tight. It'd be an expensive team, depending on the kind of raise that Ayton is looking for. I would say he's probably at about what he's going to be earning from here on out. Like, basically, the way that I would talk to Ayton is like, all right, look, if you come here and you fuck around, finding out is going to be going from the, what is he making, like 35 mil to mid-level exception money, and then even lower than that. So if you want to come here and not take this seriously and not understand the moment that you find yourself in career-wise, all right, but that's going to cost you like $30 million a year for the rest of your career. And if you're the Lakers and you've had those conversations with Dwight once upon a time and convinced him to take things a little bit more seriously, and he helped you win a championship. And maybe this time around with Ayton in his prime, he's still been productive even while he has kind of bleeped around. That's the gamble that I would make personally. And then as far as like paying him and Reeves and LeBron and Luka, cap is rising. That's going to help you a little bit. I would probably say you could probably get away with paying Ayton like 30 mil a year for a 2 or 3 year contract. I don't think anybody wants to give Ayton anything beyond a couple of years, maybe even a year or two, because of how he has bleeped around at various points of his career. But he is, he's an interesting big. And as the poster king says, right, the Blazers drafted Klingon last year, and I think it's Klingon. Klingon. That's what my daughter does. She's a cuddler. But Klingon, they drafted Klingon last year, and they want him to play, absolutely. But the problem is you also have Williams, who's this unknown with his injuries, or he is known with his injuries. And I think they probably would like to have some depth there, but yeah, you do need to open up minutes, and it's kind of difficult to do that when you have somebody like Ayton making the amount of money that he does. Not to mention whoever they draft in this year's draft here as well. We did get a super comment right here at the tail end of the show, so Appetizers and Sushi is writing, how is Rob and Jeannie viewed by other GMs and owners? I don't want to get myself into too much trouble here, but what I'll say about Rob is he's not considered the most likable guy around the league. He's a schmoozer, and he's the kind of schmoozer that a lot of people can just kind of see through. So you have that. Then also when it comes to his negotiating tactics, both as an agent back in the day and now, he writes his number on a piece of paper. He sends it across the table, leans back, and basically waits for you to match that offer or match that number. And that rubs some people the wrong way. Now, as far as Jeannie goes, this is where it's tricky because it's tough, man, because she's the kind of person you want owning your team. Like, she's a good person. And I think she means well. She desperately wants the Lakers to be good on her watch. I just think she has really bad instincts when it comes to this stuff. She overvalues loyalty and cronyism and nepotism. And that hurts her. And essentially, everybody is kind of looking at Jeannie and the Buss family and just hoping that they own the Lakers forever. Because as soon as a different owner steps in who has more in their back pocket and doesn't rely so heavily on their circle of friends, the Lakers are a sleeping giant in many executives' views, and in many fellow owners' views is like, yeah, Jeannie, no, you should never sell. It's such a big part of your family. You should never go anywhere. And And the reason for it is because, yeah, as soon as the Lakers, we just saw it with the Dodgers, where Guggenheim stepped in. The Dodgers were such a joke for basically my entire lifetime. And the Guggenheim bought the Dodgers, started investing in the infrastructure of the organization. And they're like, even as this season has been hugely frustrating and probably mostly disappointing, they're still at the top of their division. They are still on track to win like 95 plus games or whatever the number is. And they just do that year in, year out, because they are a large market team that runs itself like a small market team with the ability to also spend like a mother bleeper. And everybody's fear throughout the NBA is that the Lakers someday get sold, and whoever buys them runs them like a small market team that can also go out and spend with, spend like a drunken sailor. So yeah, I like Jeannie. I have never spoken to her directly, but I do have plenty of conversations with people who are close to her, and everybody I have ever spoken to who has ever met Jeannie says she's an absolute gem of a person. She desperately wants to be seen as good at this stuff, but her instincts are really poor. And she has a huge blind spot in how she sees, how she watched her dad run the Lakers. And he had a whole bunch of success in a different era of the NBA. She thinks that that approach still works. And then she is overly reliant on her friend circle. And it has put her in the spot where the Lakers find themselves, where, again, her competition wants her to hold on to the team forever. All right, that is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you guys are currently watching. If you're on Twitter, again, that is at youtube.com/at Lakers Lounge to find the show. If you guys are on YouTube here, like, subscribe, share, all of that good stuff. And if you guys are listening to this in the morning via podcast, hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts, especially on Odyssey, because I'm a company man. And have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you tomorrow.